and welcome back to my channel, Everlynn's Books and Tea. Today we are going to be doing my February reading wrap-up where we talk about all the different books I read in February, or at least the 6 books I read in February. So in February, I was able to read 5 out of the 7 prompts that I chose, plus I did my February challenge, which brings me to a grand total of 6 books I read in February. So not too bad for a month that only has 29 days in it. Though the caveat to that is that 2 of the books I did end up finishing in the first week of March, though I did start them in February, so we're still going to count them towards February. So we are about 2/3 of the way through March. I don't know why I can't get this video completed in the beginning of the month, but for some reason, I always end up recording my reading wrap-up in the last 2/3 of the month. So my goal in April will hopefully be able to record a little bit earlier than I am doing this month. So the one thing I realized as I was getting ready for this reading wrap-up is that 5 out of the 6 books I read were book 1 in series. So while I am trying to trim down on the series I'm currently reading, somehow in February I added 5 additional series to my list of series that I'm reading, so yay. We'll see how long it takes me to get through all those. Alright, so let's get started. So the first book I'm going to start with is the book I read for my February challenge, which was Below the Root. This book got chosen because I needed a book that was published in 1975. I did what I call a time guesser challenge, where I chose a photo, and whatever year that photo was taken, I had to read a book published in that year, and that happened to be 1975. So this is Below the Root by Zilpha Keatley Snyder. It's book 1 in her Green Sky trilogy. I did a whole video on this book, so I'm not going to go too much into it. It's a middle grade fantasy book that I read when I was younger, I believe in middle school or maybe late elementary school, and I vaguely remember doing a book report on it and really loving this book. So it was fun to kind of go back and reread it and see if it lived up to the hype. The book is set in a utopian society where the people known as the Kindar live up among the treetops of these very tall trees. The book follows 13-year-old Ramo, who has just been told that he is a chosen one, which means he's about to be inducted into the Ulzon, who are the spiritual and governmental rulers of the Kindar. Now, what's unique about Ramo is he has kept his telepathic abilities that most children have outgrown by the time they turn 13. And with this ability, as he is learning how to become an Ulzon, he actually stumbles upon this secret and realizes that the Ulzon has been keeping their people's history from the Kindar. And now he must decide if he's going to carry on that tradition and keep the Kindar people in the dark, or if it's time that the Kindar people know about their history and know why Green Sky is the way it is. So overall, I think this is a good introduction into fantasy for the middle grade age group. I kind of enjoyed reading it because recently a lot of the fantasies I've been reading have had fairies in it or kings and queens. And this book just felt really unique because it was a world that was set away from the fairies. There is no kings and queens. There's just the Ulzon, the Kindar, as well as the Pashmir, which the Kindar have been told are monsters that live underground. The one downside of this book, and I don't know if it's from it being written in 1975 or it being middle grade, is that the characters really didn't have a lot of personality to them. There was a lot going on in Ramo's life, but you didn't really get a lot of inner thoughts from him about how this was making him feel, what his emotions were. At one point, his sister is sick from something called like the wasting disease, and all you know is that he felt a little sad about it, but it didn't really kind of change what he was doing, and you didn't really feel like you knew how he felt. So that was the only downside to this book for me, is that I wish the characters had a little bit more personality in them than they actually did. So I gave this a 3.5, I think, out of 5, and I'll definitely continue on with the next 2 books in the series to see how they are. So that is Below the Root by Zilpha Keatley Snyder. Alright, so now on to the 7 books that, well, technically 14 books that I had on my TBR for the 7 prompts. So the first prompt we're going to do is a book with a shadow on the cover, and I had the option of reading The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden or I Must Betray You, and I ended up going with The Bear and the Nightingale, which is the first book in the Winter Tale trilogy. It's by Katherine Arden. The reason I chose this book is I wanted to read this book in winter, and we're starting to come to the tail end of winter, so I wanted to make sure I got it in. I read this book several years ago and I remember enjoying it, but I didn't really remember too much about the plot other than it was based on kind of like Russian fairy tales. So I was excited to get back into it and see if I enjoyed it as much the second time through as I did the first. And I did end up enjoying it a lot the second time through. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. And I felt like I picked up more of the plot the second time I was reading it than I did the first time because I kind of knew what was going to happen. So I was able to pick up a little bit more on the intricacies, I can't say that word, of the plot. So this book is set in Russia on the edge of the Russian wilderness. It follows the main character Vasya, who you're first introduced to when she is born and her mother ends up dying during childbirth. As she grows up listening to all these Russian fairy tales as a family sits around the fire during the long, cold Russian winters. And when she is probably a toddler, 3 or 4 years old, her father decides it's time that she has a new mother, and he ends up going to Moscow to bring her back a new mother. And he brings her back a mother who has lived her entire life in the city and is not prepared for life on the Russian wilderness. And when she gets there, she tells the family in no uncertain terms that the family is no longer allowed to do the rituals that they did to the household spirits to keep the village safe during the long winter months. Now, Vasa isn't too sure about this. She worries that if they stop performing these rituals, that bad things are going to come to the village. And that's kind of what happens. The Russian fairy tales, all the stories that she's been told, start to come to life. And now it's up to Vasa to save not only her family, but her entire village as well. So this is just like an enchanting, haunted fairy tale. And it's perfect for reading in the winter. This is the perfect book to read as the snow is falling down and you're sitting around the fireplace staying warm. It has just this deep winter kind of vibe to it. I am looking forward to reading the next 2 books in the series. The only thing I have to decide is if I want to wait until next winter to read them or if I'm going to read them before then. I want to take a look at the plots and see if they're the same kind of wintry plot or if there's more to them that they take place, in a different season. So that is The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden. Again, the first book in the Winter Tales trilogy, and I gave it a 4 out of 5. So next up, I had to read a book that was on a previous TBR that I did not get to. My options were Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas or The Black Gryphon by Mercedes Lackey. While I really do want to read Throne of Glass, even though it may not seem like that because I have not gotten to it despite being on my TBR multiple months, I ended up going with The Black Gryphon by Mercedes Lackey. And the reason why is I needed to read a book that had a creature as a main character as part of my science fiction fantasy challenge for the month of February. So The Black Gryphon by Mercedes Lackey and also by Larry Dixon is set in the world created by Mercedes Lackey that's known as Valdemar. And she has written, probably like 30, 40 books set in Valdemar that span centuries. I've read several of the later books in this series and really enjoy them. So I've always been meaning to kind of come back to the beginning of the series and read it from start to finish chronologically. So the books were written differently in publication order than they were chronologically because she kind of bounces between different time periods. So if you're reading them chronologically, the first book is The Black Gryphon, and it's also book 1 of the Mage Wars. And the basic plot of this book is your typical fantasy trope of a war between good and evil. You have the good wizard mage known as Earthro, who is fighting the bad evil mage known as Mar. The unique part about this is that the book doesn't actually take place on the battlefield. It takes place back in Earthro's camp. And instead of the book really being about the war, it's more about the different relationships between the different characters in the book. So the main characters are Skan, who is the Black Gryphon, and he's kind of famous throughout the camp because he's the fiercest Gryphon. He's the most intelligent. He's the one that is willing to go into these dangerous situations that have little to no chance of survival, and he always comes back alive. And then the other main character is Amber Drake, who is a healer of not just physical healer, but a psychological healer, a spiritual healer. So he's a human. And there's many other side characters in this book as well. Urtho, the good mage, has created these sentient creatures that he is using to help defend his land. So not only are there the Gryphons, which are the kind of bird-like creatures, there are these, I think it's like Heretici, which are the lizard-like creatures that kind of help the healers do their duties and make sure that they're taking care of themselves. And then there are wizards and a whole host of other creatures going on. But like I said, the big thing about this book is not the war itself, it's the relationships between the different creatures, between the different humans, and how they kind of evolve and change in the setting of war. So you really get to see a lot of these characters grow. You see a lot of these characters' beliefs kind of change as well, which is kind of fun to see. There's definitely character growth. This is a very character-driven story, more so than a lot of books I've read, which was a nice change. The one critique I have is that the first 50 to 100 pages were very confusing because the author uses a lot of terms that are made up for this world, and it takes a while to get used to all these different terms and know what they mean and who they refer to. But once you get through that part, the rest of the book is good. It's not a action-packed plot, so if you're looking for that, definitely not a book for you. But if you are looking for a character-driven plot where the characters actually do change and the relationships between the different characters change, definitely think about picking up this book and seeing how you like it. So again, this is The Black Gryphon by Mercedes Lackey and Larry Dixon, which is book 1 in the Voldemort series. So next I had to read a book that was rated between 4.1 and 4.4 on Goodreads. So I had the option of choosing The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes and The Dutch House by Ann Patchett, I believe. Ann Patchett. I went with The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I have really wanted to read this series ever since I bought it, I think back in December. And I was so excited to get this onto my TBR and see what it was like. Obviously, this is a very popular book. This is the first book in the series. It follows a group of teenagers who have been placed into this house in Washington, D.C. as part of a classified FBI program where they're going to use their exceptional skills to help solve cold cases. So it's kind of like a Criminal Minds for young adults. The main character is 17-year-old Cassie, who has a unique ability of being able to read people and being able to figure out their motivations and knowing who they are and what they want. So her ability is basically to be a profiler. So this book kind of follows her as she gets settled into the classified program, and then when a serial killer comes around, the book kind of follows them as they try to solve this case with the help as well as the pushback from the actual FBI agents who are supposed to be training them. I read this book at night. For parts of this book, nighttime is probably not the best time to read it because there's a lot of creepy stuff that goes in this book, as well as certain sections where you just kind of are in the killer's mind and you are listening to how they think and what they are doing. Those are not the best sections to read in the middle of the night if you don't, want to be thinking about that type of stuff. Overall, I gave this book a 4 out of 5. I felt like some of the characterizations and personalities could be a little bit more fleshed out, especially between the two boys in the program, Dean and Michael. For some reason, I kept getting those two confused about what their abilities were and what their past was. But other than that, like I said, I definitely enjoyed this book. It was a nice, quick, fast-paced read, and I am looking forward to reading the rest of the series. So that is Jennifer Lynn Barnes, who wrote The Naturals, book 1 in the Naturals series. I gave it a 4 out of 5. Next up, I had to read a book that had a illustrated cover. I had the options of A Heart So Fierce and Broken by Brigid Kemmerer and Dear Haiti Love Elaine by Maritza and Micah Moonlight. So I went with Dear Haiti Love Elaine. As part of my Around the World Challenge, the country I had to read a story from in February was Haiti. And not only was this book set in Haiti, the two authors, who are sisters, their parents are both Haitian. So they had a connection to Haiti as well, which I always enjoy choosing books where the author has some sort of connection with the country that the book is set in. So Dear Haiti, Love Elaine follows the 17-year-old Elaine, whose parents are both from Haiti. She was born in America. Her mom is a newscaster. Her dad is a psychiatrist. They got divorced when she was younger, and her mom kind of moves all around the country finding stories and, being a newscaster, basically. Cassie's currently in a private school, or not Cassie, that's the other story. Elaine is currently in private school, and one day her mom makes this big error on air, and when she goes to school the next day, everyone in the school is kind of making fun of her for this. And she obviously gets upset, and she ends up doing something that she shouldn't have, which ends up putting one of her classmates into a life-threatening situation due to an allergy that he has, which she did completely unintentionally. But because of this, she ends up almost getting expelled. But instead of being expelled, her family and the school come to an agreement that she will go to Haiti for the rest of the semester and work for her aunt's nonprofit, which happens to be in Haiti. And she will also write a report on the history of Haiti. And I forget if learning about her family's history is part of that report or not. But either way, that ends up being what happens. So she ends up going to Haiti for the first time in her life. She's heard a lot about Haiti through her parents, but hasn't actually visited there herself, I don't think. Her mom, after her whole on-air error, ends up going to Haiti as well to kind of hide, and she ends up living with her mom and her aunt in Haiti. While there, she starts learning about her family's history, and as part of that history, she also learns that there's a curse on her family that she has now made it her goal to break. So the book kind of follows her as she learns about her family history. She learns about how her mom and dad grew up in Haiti. They came from very different backgrounds. She learns about the nonprofit that her aunt runs, and she starts learning a little bit about Haitian history as well. So overall, this book was enjoying to read. It was written in a unique way, and that was written through journal articles, through texts, emails, through her mom's journal, through different media as well. The journal entries, I will say, are written more like normal chapters. They don't really feel like journal entries, but they are told from the perspective of Elaine. So this was an enjoyable read. It was fast-paced because the chapters were really short, and while there wasn't like a lot of action, you were kind of moving through the book really fast, which I enjoyed, and it was just kind of like a fun read. I feel like it would be a good read for out on the beach or for, a weekend at the lake, I don't know, something like that. Something where you just want something a little bit fun to read. There are some kind of sad things that do happen in the book though, so just beware of that. And the other thing was that some parts of the book just felt, I don't know, I guess you could say messy when you're reading them, like it's just kind of jumping around. But then when you think about it, you're reading this from the perspective of a 17-year-old whose whole life has just been upturned. Her mom just did something crazy on air. She just got suspended, almost expelled, and then just thrust into this foreign country where she learns that her family has a curse on it. So you can kind of see why parts of it feel a little bit messy, and when you think of it that way, it makes a little bit more sense. So overall, I gave this a 4 out of 5. I don't know if the authors have written anything else. I think this may have been I don't know if this was their debut novel. I think it was the first novel they wrote together, but I definitely want to see if there's any other books out there by them, because I did enjoy reading this one. So again, Dear Haiti, Love Elaine, 4 out of 5. Contemporary fiction novel, young adult. All right, next up, had to read a prompt that had a fully neutral cover. Had the option of The City of Dusk by Tara Sim or The Atlas Six by Olivia Blake. And I went with The Atlas Six, which is the first book in the Atlas series. I've been wanting to read this one for a while, obviously because I've heard a lot about it on the social media networks. It's a dark academia novel that is set on Earth in a world where people have magic, and each person has a different type of magic and a different strength of magic. On this earth is something known as the Alexandria Society, which is this kind of secret society that has access to these, literature, books, information that goes way, way back, and to be able to get access to this information, you have to be a member of the Alexandria Society. But the Alexandria Society only invites 6 people every 10 years to become a member. Now, out of those 6, only 5 make it all the way to initiation into the society. One of the 6 is eliminated in the first year. So this book follows the 6 current initiates to the society, and the book is told from each of their viewpoints. So each chapter is one of their viewpoints. They all have these different personalities. They all come from different backgrounds, from different parts of the world, and are kind of thrust together where they know that only 5 of them are going to make it all the way through to initiation, which creates kind of a, what do you want to call it? Kind of a difficult situation. So overall, I enjoyed this book. I do like dark academia fantasy books, though. The one thing I would say is I wish there was a little bit more world building in this book, or even a little bit more description of the world. For example, the building that they're staying in as they are going through this initiation. You can't really visualize it in your head because there's just not a lot of description around it. Also, the first year they're going through all these different classes, learning about these different things. I feel like a little bit more emphasis on that would have been nice, just because that's kind of the stuff I like to read. It may not have made a difference in the plot, but from, my personal standpoint. I think having a viewpoint for each character also makes it easier to decide which characters you're going to root for, which ones you are hoping they don't make it through, because you get to kind of see their true beliefs and what they're thinking be inside each of their heads as you read through the book. There are definitely some twists and turns throughout the book that I wasn't expecting, but that made it a little bit more engaging, because otherwise I will say there's not a lot of action in the first at least half of the book. By the end, definitely more things are happening, and it makes you want to go on to read at least the next book and see how some of this stuff concludes. So I'm definitely looking forward to the next book in the series, and I hope to get that on my TBR in the next couple of months before I forget about what happened in this first book. But I gave this book a 4 out of 5 as well. So that was The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. So those were the 6 books I read this month. The last 2 prompts I did not get to, unfortunately. And they were to read a book set in a winter wonderland, and that the options I had for that was Winter Solstice by Rosamund Pilcher and Sweet Haven. And unfortunately, I did not get to either of those. And then the other prompt was to read a book that had red, white, or pink on the cover. And my options for that were What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez or Red Rising by Pierce Brown. And unfortunately, I did not get to either of those because I really did want to read both of those books. So hopefully I'll get to them on a future TBR. I'm definitely looking forward to reading those too. So don't be surprised if this comes up on my April or May TBRs. So I hope you enjoyed my February reading wrap up. Like I said, I had a good month. I somehow managed to start 5 new series, but that will be a future me problem. And we are 2/3 of the way through March. I'm actually doing pretty good in March. I finished 3 prompts already, and I'm in the middle of 2 additional prompts. So I'm hoping to get through at least 6 prompts, if not all 7. We'll see. That may be a little ambitious because I still have to do my March challenge, which is to read a book written in a different language, so that will probably take up a little bit of my time. But it's also a challenge that I am looking forward to because I haven't read a book before written in a foreign language, and I'm excited to see how that goes. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, and if you want to see more videos by me in the future, please hit the subscribe button. Otherwise, I think my next video that will come out will be my March challenge video, and we'll find out how I do reading a book written in Spanish. Again, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in my next video. Take care.